Welcome to episode 469 of the Haskincast. I almost forgot what it was called, the Haskincast podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, here with my good friend, John Reynolds. John, how are you doing?
We're doing fine here. Thank you very much. Yourself? How you like in Tulsa?
I haven't gotten to see a whole lot of it. I sold my car in April. I realized I didn't really need one. And so I had to pick an area that had a good walking score. So I have a lot that's within walking distance, but as far as seeing a lot of the city, I haven't had a chance to do that. I'll probably rent a car at some point and just kind of just drive around for a couple of days and really check it out. But I am enjoying having an actual autumn, which I have not had in Phoenix or Vegas. So a good 20 years or more since I lived in Colorado. So the weather's great.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very different than when I was a child there, I'll tell you that. Very, very different.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, like when I was growing up in Michigan, just having snow for the winter and not seeing the grass. And you said it was pretty similar here. And then that set us off on a whole tangent about climate change and history. And it's been a great talk so far. But when you were on last time, we talked about your career in film, mostly working on films like E.T. and Twilight Zone. I mean, you've really had a fascinating career, but you've really spent more time working in theater.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a theater person. Actually, it kind of took me a long while to come to that recognition. I wasn't a film director person. I can do it. I've done it. Mm-hmm. But theater is my best. I love it. And basically, I love working with actors. I mean, it really comes down to the story and actors. And yeah, it's big.
I think what frustrates me about theater, and I've worked, as an audio engineer, I've done quite a number of theater gigs in Colorado, Las Vegas. But the thing about film is that if I want to relive that experience, if I want to take the Lord of the Rings journey, I've got DVDs, I can watch them online, I can re-experience all that, the music, the acting, all of that. Most plays are not recorded. So if you're not able to go see them, you don't get that experience. And if you were a part of it, you don't have a chance to relive those moments. That frustrates me.
That's interesting. I haven't actually given that a thought. I find that they do record them, actually, because they do write the scripts down so that people can reproduce them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's a very interesting thing. You've got to kind of trip me onto something I want to have to give some thought to, because I think that's fascinating. I think, yeah, I don't know. I guess the thing would be you need to go back and see more theater. So you have the experience. Yeah. Let me ask you this. When you do that, does this experience stick with you more?
I would say so. I mean, there's a difference between watching something on a screen and actually being in the room with the same energy. It's kind of like why I don't like live albums that much. The band plays a little bit faster. The tempos are a little bit different. The pitch, everything just feels different. And when you're listening to it on record, it doesn't kind of connect as much. But if you're there with the band and you're with their energy and you're in the presence of the crowd, the tempos don't matter. It makes sense because you're there. I think it's kind of the same with going to the theater. If I'm there with the actors and I'm getting their energy and I'm there with the crowd and I'm getting their energy and we're all sharing this experience, I think I connect with it. Whereas when I'm watching a movie, I can fully enjoy it, but I'm not connecting with the experience.
Yeah, I think you kind of put your finger on it, actually. It gets back to who we are biologically when you think about it. I mean, when you're in a theater and you're seeing people perform, there's a biological connection there. When you're at a concert with a band, you're a part of the reason that band is jacked up and playing the tempos they're playing.
Right.
It's the room, right? So, yeah, so when you're not and you're reviewing it on a two-dimensional object, there's that authenticness that's missing, and that is that vibration of you and them in the same room together.
Right. Yeah. That energetic that you just can't really capture.
And the experience of having it with other people that are living and breathing is right around you, while you're in the process.
Well, I will say, I think part of what makes me sad is I've worked on a couple of really amazing plays that I really wish I could experience again. Like I worked on one in Vegas called Bright Side. The music was fantastic. The acting was stellar. Um, and it was a very intense play. You know, there even after 3 weeks of rehearsal and 3 weeks of running, even the very last show, I'm sitting there. I'm running the audio. I've got to mute and unmute mics on cue, and I'm still sitting here going, I know what's going to happen in a minute, and I don't want to see this again because it's just too much, and I can't re-experience that because there's no physical record of it. And even if it were to be done again, it's different actors, different performances of the music, all that. So I think that's why, and I'm kind of an archivist, so maybe it hits me a little bit harder
Yeah,
than other people.
yeah, that would explain it too. Well, I'm going to go deep here with you really quick. I'm going to say that I believe that theater is the voice of humanity.
Mhm.
And there's not a village or a city anywhere you can go that there's not theater.
Right.
And theater is humanity's voice. It's talking about its past, its future, where it's going to go. Why did we do that?
Mhm.
How can I change? How we can be better? How are we worse?
Yeah,
We explore ourselves. You don't get that in um, any other way.
that's true.
Certainly, you don't get that at a church.
Hmm.
It's myopic in its own way. Um, Music's a different kind of reality in a way. I was thinking about this the other day, and I realized that, you know, theater is very subjective. It's a subjective art, whereas music is got its foot in both. It's objective in that the Kabbalah, whatever they call it, the Kabbalah says that there's an order, and in the order, mathematics is number one, and number two is music. And the reason why music is two, the only reason, is because it requires mathematics to
Right.
exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that's objective. That's scientifically objective reality.
Hmm.
But you have the ability with that particular objective reality to go off on a subjective, take it to subjective expression, right?
Right.
So that's the reason why a three chord with a relative minor can play so many hundreds of songs
Yeah.
around the world and be different, you
Well,
know?
what wasn't I mean, theater's often been used as kind of a political platform in a way too, because they would often go and say, why is our government doing this? Why does our city run this way? And kind of pushing
Plato
that limit.
said, those who those who tell stories control society.
Mhm. Okay, so before our technical difficulties, we were talking about Plato's quote and how he who controls, say that again, if you would, please.
Those who control story uh, control society. Those who tell stories control society. That is it. Those who tell stories control society.
And I find that to be true.
Well, it is. Well, understand this. We are the only animal that tells stories.
Hmm.
You don't find a diary by a beluga whale. The wolves haven't left how to survive a wolf pack in the jungle stuff. It doesn't survive. So, as far as we know, we are the only animal that tells stories. We are here where we are today because of stories, telling
Hmm.
stories. Corporations are considered legal fictions. Why? You can't taste a corporation. You can't, it's not, it's a quagmire of legalities and paper that make it what it is.
And if you think
So,
about it, this goes back to caveman days. I mean, we've seen stories being told in cave paintings. So this really is part of our history from the beginning of our known history.
well, I think it's started when we became cognitively aware, or conscious, let's say. Well, conscious is a loose term because all animals are cognitively conscious at some degree. But when we, maybe ate the magic mushroom, who knows? But at some point along the line, our cognitive abilities took off, and in that, it developed in the subjective realities.
Hmm.
Basically, it's manifests itself, and it's out of it comes certain, objectives like mathematics and stuff like that. Like we were talking about early music and that. That's what actually was this particular thought about it originating that made me think, well, music was there too.
Mhm.
And it's such a fundamental part of who we are organically. There's something there, something important to us, you know. And then I thought about it and I went, the music is really kind of objective too. It's not just subjective. It's very objective. I guess you could say acting is objective in that you play words that are written down, but you're dealing with objective realities. But
Sure.
bottom line, we tell stories, and that's what makes theater so powerful. And we need each other collaboratively to function. For example, I pointed out to somebody the other day, you get on an airplane, you don't know who the pilot is, you don't know the stewardesses, you don't know the people handling your baggage. They fly up and they take you thousands of feet up in the air. You don't know, there's guys on the ground somewhere monitoring. You don't know any of those people. That
Right.
you depend on them to get you to where you're going safely.
Well,
That's the way we
yeah.
are.
And even
We're not
even
like,
even
go
further,
ahead.
think about going to like a dentist for the first time. And you're like, hey, it's really nice to meet you. Feel free to stick your fingers in metal objects in my mouth and root around.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so that's a reality of who we are, which is a function I think that we're sadly it's going sadly unrecognized today. That reality of how much how important it is, that reality. I had a conversation with a doctor, retired one day at the driving range here in Sedona, and he got into some stuff and he said something about COVID, that he didn't believe all that COVID stuff.
Hmm.
And I said, can I ask to say something? He goes, yeah. I said, well, those birds, the trees, you, me, everything around us, this grass that grows, it's all biological, and all biology has a singular purpose, this common purpose, and that is to survive, but not just to survive, but to survive better.
Hmm.
That's the reason why the flu keeps coming back. That's the reason why COVID keeps coming back. And the light went on in his eyes. I saw, he went, oh my God, he's right,
Hmm.
because he's a doctor. He knows this, but he let his political position remove him from practical thinking, logical thinking. Let's get back to who we biologically are.
Well, I think that's the
You
common
know,
thing today, isn't it? People are letting narratives control their decision making and their mental state as opposed to just using common sense and thinking for themselves anymore.
yeah, I think so, but I think it's because we haven't been taught. In
Hmm.
other words, there's no classes in school per se. It took me a long time to realize why drama in high school was so important, because that's the only course in high school where you get to talk about your psychological self.
Hmm.
And you do that by the exploration of characters you play in plays. A part of my process with working with high school students or young actors and stuff is to create small scenes, to take scenes from movies and stuff that are kid actors and stuff like that, you
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
get them started on, dialogue, but because again, the reason why I love theater is because of working with actors and working with the word. Because the word is the God in theater. It's not like film. When you sell the word to the director, it becomes the director's word, and they do what they want to do with it. Whether
Hmm.
they want to be truthful to you or not is, it's not that field. But in theater, the way it is, you can't do that. You
Hmm.
can't change the word of an author without permission.
Right.
It's the final word. And so it's a collaborative process working with a writer as a director. I work with my wife. She's a tremendous writer.
Hmm.
We just finished a really great play she wrote with her partner, Chandra, who wrote the music, some beautiful stuff.
Hmm.
A very, very powerful piece. And it's basically the idea, it was done by the museum, the Heritage Museum here in Sedona. And it was about people who had been in Sedona's history and their contributions to Sedona, who they were.
Okay.
And okay, so but bottom line, what took place on stage, was a group of women who came together and who supported each other, even though each of them had their differences. They had their very differences from one another. They could all agree on certain elements of who they were as women,
Mm.
what their part has been, their contribution, and it's a very powerful piece. It goes way beyond the history of Sedona. You could do this show anywhere, and it's going to resonate with women and woke men, I guess you would say.
That's
But
such a term these
because
days.
I know it's a joke, but because anybody who recognizes women are equal partners in this process, and again, that goes back to our religious past and all of that. I mean, you can get into that, but I don't want to go there. I want to stick with the theater thing,
Hmm.
which is all about the fact that it's through their voice, they had a response from women in the area who wanted to take it everywhere. They wanted women to see this everywhere.
Hmm.
It's their gotten called. They're going to do the show several more times, and that's because of the word. And interestingly, I've been involved with my wife and Chandra for a long time.
Hmm.
But when we get to the theater and Chandra's written music, Chandra's a music director. I can battle with her, but in the end, she's going to win because that's, it's her thing. But she's very, she's not that type of person. She's really workable. She really works
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
She's a good listener.
Hmm.
And the same thing with Deb. But at points during rehearsal, I'll be directing an actor and giving them information or saying things, and then I'll go, "Well, this is a writer thing," And I go, "Okay, Deb, this is, what are we doing here?"
Right.
And it gets resolved because you have to recognize it's a team effort. You have to recognize everybody's responsibility in it. But the word is what it's all about. And the actors, they bring the word. And to watch a human being have a authentic moment on stage is extraordinarily powerful. And that's what makes you go, wow, that stage play is so good. That's so great because there's a connection.
Hmm.
And and so the audience, that's my whole thing is like when these girls started rehearsing, I said, we have plenty of time. You don't have to memorize the dialogue because I hate memorization.
Hmm.
It's a slippery slope. You don't have to memorize. You need to focus on the intention. So when you go through the lines, go through the intention of the line. What do I want here? Why would I want that?
Hmm.
What does that mean to so and so? Go find out what does those things mean, you know. And so the camaraderie of the ladies on stage is what sells the show. That's what sells the product. When they get along and they have that warmth among themselves, that familiarity and trust in one another, audience feels it and they gravitate towards that because we have a need for that. And that's the power, the elixir of theater. I have this thing, Dev calls it my litany. I learned it from one of my mentors, Harry Master George, and he said acting is a child's game played by adults with adult themes.
Hmm.
And the idea there is it's a game. Let's pretend. That's the important thing. Let's pretend we're Macbeth. Let's pretend, we're Monty Welsh or the robot. And let's pretend
Hmm.
with adult themes.
Right.
Uh, right? Okay. Now the important part, which is my litany part, is if you believe it, they'll believe it. And
Yeah.
so what I say to actors is there's 100 people in the room tonight. 25, and I'm being very generous here, 25% of those people, 25 of them do not want to be here. They're here for whatever reasons. They're here to impress somebody. They got drug here. Whatever they got these reasons. They really want to be here.
Hmm.
75 people paid their money because they want to be here. They want one thing. They want to believe. That's
Hmm.
why they're here. And so they're sitting there waiting for the curtain to come up, and they believe already. If you believe it, they believe it. And if they believe it, you have a consummated relationship and you have the perfect marriage, a theatrical marriage of the night where the performers come together with the audience, the word comes together with the audience, and everybody has that moment together. It's a powerful thing.
And
I just saw, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I just want to say I think that's part of the draw why film actors will sometimes take a year or two off of doing movies and go back to theater. Like Al Pacino will do that. And you don't get that kind of a connection in film. You go in, you film your stuff, somebody else puts it all together. You don't sit with the audience at the theater. You don't get the enjoyment or the connection with them to experience the dawning of that reality on them at all. It's completely disconnected.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was at the Pasadena Playhouse, I had a coach, Ed Ludlin, I'll never forget him, a short, stubby, kind of German guy who did a whole bunch of Gunsmokes when that was really popular.
Oh yeah.
He was a Gunsmoke director. So one day in class, he had me break down the line to word by word. And he made me stop at every word and think about it and then say the next word.
Okay.
And so, I mean, talk about laborious. That was, but after a while, the whole room was totally captivated because, because what I was doing was I was actually thinking about the lines. So years later, I'm working on a movie called Comes a Horseman, and James Caan is on that. And we're doing a shot in this bar setup over at MGM. And Gordon Willis, cameraman, is lighting him, I guess. And he's sitting on the other side of the bar, and I'm sitting there. And he tells a Godfather story.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how Marlon Brando doesn't learn lines. And what he does is he goes in and they block the scene. And while they're blocking the scene, he makes notes of what his lines are. And he puts them into places where the camera is going to be able to read him, where the director wants to see his position, right?
Okay.
And that's led to the stories of writing on people's foreheads and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what he'd do is he'd go over and they'd say something to him and he'd look up at the line. And then that's the first time really he looked at it, other than, getting it written down and putting it there. And what he did is he'd look at it and he would think about it. How do I feel about that? How's that going to make him feel? What I want out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And that he'd rub his cheek maybe as a Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
And then he'd turn around and look at the other actor and say, give him a deal he can't refuse. Right? Anyway, so what they do is A team goes in, they rehearse, they block it. He would do his shtick and they would leave for makeup and whatever. B team comes in, they light everything. And during B, Jimmy Caan would go in there and take his notes and rewrite them.
Hmm.
And put really foul language on them. So Brando would come in, and he'd start the thing, and he'd read the first line, and this all this stuff would spew out of his mouth. He'd go, cut, cut, cut. Is that in the script? And interesting, Jane Fonda, when she was doing work on stage, unless she had to do it with Jimmy Caan, she didn't want him on stage.
I can't imagine why.
Well, yeah, because he was a practical joker who loved to do that stuff. Well, but anyway, the point here is that the Marlon Brando's process now, in a way, because that's the way I would work on camera. Mm-hmm. I don't want to memorize the line because then you have the problem of trying to say it the same way because you memorize it. You can't do that. You have to have to think about what do I try to say here. And that's the reason why now in films today, there's a lot of improvisation that takes place, mm-hmm. specifically because of that reality. And when you factor in the fact that most actors in Hollywood or whatever actually are simply use actors, mm-hmm. meaning that they use themselves. And that's not method acting. I don't mean it that way. I mean it in that in our life we have all these things. Well, there's a part of us that can be anything. It's there. It's just a matter of choices, the story we tell ourselves. And so if we tell our story of ourselves that we're a mobster we can become a monster. It's a language.
Right.
And so if we are believing in ourselves as a monster, that's who I feel, and I'm enjoying John as a mobster, I'm going to be good. I'm going to be fine.
Well,
Um,
and a
it's
really good, I'm sorry, a really good
go ahead.
example of that would be Robin Williams in the film Insomnia, where he played a killer. And you think, Robin Williams, he's always just jovial and joking and bouncing around and comedic. You wouldn't think of him as somebody who could play a dark killer in that manner, but that he sold that so well. And I mean, that's
You
what acting is supposed to be, but that's really, I think, a great example of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I use him a lot with new people in acting. And I tell them, the reason why Robin Williams could be the way he was on stage is his comedian self is because he understood a law of stage, and that is you cannot do wrong. When
Mm.
you're up there, the audience has no clue. So if you make mistakes, they don't know
Mm.
unless you let them know.
True.
See? So when it came to acting, it was a whole new reality for him. I mean, one of the best pieces of advice he was given, which is something I actually was working on, with the ladies in the show this current time, is listening.
Yeah.
Listening in films is huge.
Mhm.
It's absolutely huge. And what you do is, I would just remind my cast, we listen to understand, not to reply.
That's
It's
the
a good rule of
opposite of the
life.
way that society seems to have gone, but that's a whole other
It's
conversation.
true. It's true. But as actors, it's your tool. It's
Right.
an important tool. You listen to understand. And that goes back to the one word. Why that word? How do I feel? Like I would use to be or not to be. That's when I use to be. What's it like to be? To smell the floor, to watch the leaves turn yellow, to hear the rain on the roof, to watch a puppy play. Not to be. See, so when I know all the things that about it means to be something, then when I say to be, it means something.
Well, it seems to
See,
me that when that the script, the way it's written, really has 3 points. I mean, one is the intention of telling the story. The second for the
mhm.
actor would be telling it in the right emotional state. And then third would be the continuity side of it. So if you're not reading the dialogue exactly as it's written, then you just have to make sure that you don't get yourself into some kind of continuity trap. Apart from
Yeah.
that, it seems like as long as you're hitting those marks, you really don't need to follow it word by word.
Well, that's again the reason why you do intentions, because what I've found in working with actors is that uh, I my I don't like to block people per se. I don't like to say, here, you go there, you go there. Sometimes it's dictated by the script. It just dictates it and then you go with it.
Sure.
But if I don't have to, and there's going to be some blocking, they're going to be moving in a scene, I don't want to tell them what to do. I
Mhm.
want them to tell themselves what needs to be done. And how I do that is by observing them. And I have them, first of all, it's always start sitting, take away all of the emotion or physical uh, stuff. You're just sitting.
Mhm. Right.
Because if you're standing, you start twitching. So just sit.
Mhm.
Somewhere along the line, an actor will get into what they're doing and they'll feel the need to stand up. Now, the question is why? Is it because they feel like they've been sitting there and their ass is getting tired? Or they just did it because they felt like it?
Mhm.
Well, I just did that because I felt, well, let's see, where do you want to go with that? Okay, let's do it again. Boom, they get up and they move and they go someplace. You go,
Mhm.
okay, that's great. Or move a little stage right or a little this, So they discover, and it's an emotional thing. So they have skin in the game, as they say in Hollywood.
Right. Yeah.
you know, yeah, they own it, and that's the thing that's important. I think it's important to me when I want the people I work with, I want them to own the material they're doing. Because if they own it, they'll believe in it. If they'll believe in it, the audience will believe in it, and people will walk away loving the show.
Right. Well,
And And audiences are particular too, because you can have, I've done a lot of comedies, and by the way, musicals are my favorites. But
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
the audience will sit there, laugh, they'll do all their thing, and then this curtain goes up and the actors come out, they'll stand up and give an ovation. The next night, an audience come in, see the exact same show, sit there, laugh and all that stuff, and then the curtain comes up, goes down, they get up and walk right out of the room.
Yeah,
Or they laugh
it's weird.
hysterically, they roar, they're loud, and they just walk right out of the room. You can, it's a muse, it's a theater. You
Mm.
can never tell, but they enjoyed it because they laughed their butts off when they're doing it. They just got up and left. The other people are like, "Wow, this is," and they were moved too, but they stayed to show their appreciation to it. And the shows were, to me, there's no difference. I mean, I pick actors apart in my shows. I mean, I go, "Oh, you missed that. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was really good."
Mm.
You know, um, so
But did you
yeah,
ever have those times where the audience, like you just have an audience that just doesn't get the jokes? They just, for whatever reason, maybe it's a weird day and most of the audience is just not connecting with everything, even though the last 10 performances they've been rolling hysterically.
you know, no, I don't think so.
Good.
I'd have to. Well, actually, I'd have to go back in time, and I would say that there was a period of time when we were doing a group of shows up in Flagstaff, and the shows that we do here are pretty intimate pieces,
Mm.
frankly. I mean, that's a desirable thing in a room full, because there it gets to be too big and there's too many people. And the actors have to project and they have to start really, you know. But anyway, I think some of those shows are exactly like that. But I, at the time, was so tormented by the whole prospect of doing a small show on a big stage.
Oh, yeah.
We had that happen in Phoenix, actually. We took a show that we developed here, Pump Boys and Dinettes. It was a big, everybody loved it. Phoenix came, oh, we love it. And they brought it down there. And it was intimate. And then they put it on this big stage and it lost its intimacy.
Mm, yeah.
And that takes away from it. So it's the right show in the right room.
Well, the stage is
I
a
mean,
character, right? I mean, just as much as the soundtrack or anything else, the environment that you're creating has to be just as believable. And if you've got two people that fit on a couch in a small theater, and that's fine, and then you take that and you put them on a big stage, all of a sudden, now the reality of just a couch sitting on that stage doesn't really help the audience connect with what's going on.
the actors have to be big,
Right.
um, and that's where you get, so many of the older now British actors that we've been living with for years, because they come from stage that's theatrically trained,
Hmm.
where a lot of actors in America are film trained for film, go to acting workshops. That's what I did. I went to two of the best in Hollywood. It's simultaneous, but I'd go from one to the other, and they
Wow.
were like apples and oranges.
Hmm.
But I walk away with Peggy Fury's ability to tell stories and talk a lot, and Harry Master George's, you got, it's simple. You just believe.
Hmm.
You just believe in. He cited once an interview that he saw with Kurt Russell, who has grown up in the business. And the interviewer asked him where he studied. He goes, "Oh, I don't study. I've never studied."
Hmm.
And she goes, "You don't take an acting workshop?" He goes, "No, I don't." She goes, "What do you do?" And he goes, "Oh, I just pretend."
Yeah, it's called acting.
Yeah, I just pretend. And if you look at his work, he's simple use. And
Hmm.
there isn't a character in him that he couldn't be if he had made those choices in his life.
Very true.
So
Well,
he's not.
it's kind of like music theory, right? If you know music theory in and out, you kind of lock yourself into certain rules and things that don't give you the freedom to explore outside of that. And I think acting school could be the same thing for a lot of actors. It's like, well, this is Meisner. I'm supposed to do this way, or this is that, and this has to be done this way, or this is how, if you're classically trained, you do things. That doesn't allow for you to be your own actor.
I just saw a piece. I really regretfully cannot tell you the name of it or the actor who did it, who's a um, who's a woman who does men.
Uh-huh.
And she's a Shakespearean actress. She's been doing it for 20, 30 years. And she has her one woman show that she does, which she weaves in Shakespeare with her story. And so I'm watching a classically trained actress on stage in very intimate. There must have been, what, 30 or 40 people in the room. And I'm in awe of her craft.
Hmm.
And I'm going, it won't work here.
Really?
It ain't going to work here. It's apples and oranges. So if you put that on a big stage, it translates really extraordinarily well because the movements are are choreographed.
Hmm.
There's nothing there's nothing there that hasn't been rehearsed 100 times.
Right.
And so, because she's just got the show back up again, and she's just starting to go back out again. So she's kind of using this as a place to get her legs. That's what she mentioned that the other
Oh,
night.
okay.
Anyway, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant place. I wanted, if I was going to raise my hand and say anything to her, I would have said, "You certainly made the right choice, life choice."
Oh,
Because she was staggeringly beautiful. And at the same time, coming from my headspace and where I do and what I do, I was going, that kind of work basically wouldn't fly here unless you were doing a Shakespeare play. And then they would go, oh, that's a part of Shakespeare, which
right.
is exactly it. But I want you to know that when she did Men, um, I I saw a man right there in front of me in
Wow.
flesh and blood.
That's
It,
impressive.
it was awesome.
Well, I want to go back to something that you said earlier because you said that you don't like to block. Now, of course, having worked in film, you understand, you have to do that because of camera angles and all
Yeah,
that. But in
yeah.
theater, don't you have to be concerned about the lighting?
Well, no, because that comes second
Hmm.
in both of those situations. A film set, you bring in the actors, say it's a kitchen scene, you have a couple of people. Okay, let's walk them through. What are you going to be doing here? What are you going to be tossing a salad? And you're going to be doing this. And let's get all those things worked out. And then as you're working those things out, you stand there with the cameraman. You go, let's get this one over here. Let's do this over here. And let's try that there. And at the same time, you work with the actors on their blocking as they do it. And it's like a teamwork. And then you're just saying, here's what I want. In stage, it's the same thing, except that I'm more likely to allow the actors to work it out themselves
Hmm.
than I am to get involved in it. That's not that I say I won't or I don't.
Hmm.
It's just my preference is to allow them to work it out because then they own it themselves. They know what they need to do. If I see there's a problem with it or there needs to be more of something, then I step in. I go, we need to do something here. We need to do this. But I really like to encourage them to find it for themselves because, again, it gives them skin in the game, as I say. So then when they're on stage doing it, well, they're already comfortable. It's a part of who they are.
Do they
So it's not
naturally stay in the
something.
light?
No. Then what happens then is you sit down with your lighting director, or in the case of a cameraman, he's got his gaffer. Um, and you say, okay, well, with camera, you're just working. Well, you can work three cameras, so you have different areas that you're going to light because certain cast members are going to be in certain locations.
Hmm.
And the same thing is true on theater. One of the things about me here in town, because I do a lot of lighting, I've done it for most of my life,
Right.
is I don't like to do anything without backlight
Hmm.
unless there's natural there. And the reason is because biologically speaking, we can't differentiate something in a person in the foreground from a background under a lot of conditions where they're just kind of mud. The minute you rim them in a light, they stand out and you can focus just on them and the rest of it drops out.
Hmm.
So backlighting is really important for differentiating your subject from the background. I don't care if you're on stage or in front of a camera. something to differentiate them. And it also it's Rembrandt stuff. They used to call it that in the old days, Rembrandt lighting. It's three light process: a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. And they call it Rembrandt because he would have vases in a place where there was no light, and yet there would be light around them, and they'd be kind of back around them and wrap around them. So
Oh,
he separated by modeling them out of the background by using light. He just
mhm.
put it in places where there wouldn't be any light. I know
Interesting.
that when I worked with Steven Spielberg in the beginning, I worked on several things, and he had a real issue. If the light wasn't seen in the scene, you couldn't light from that angle. He used to drive, well, specifically Alan, crazy.
Mhm.
But later on, I think he forgave that for some reason. Maybe it doesn't matter to him anymore. But later his work seemed to change. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, lighting is important, and you need to know where your actors are going to be. So I have very limited lighting opportunities here as far as equipment in the right location, the right place, and the right amount of it, etc. So
Mhm.
I have to be very creative and very so I light areas specifically. So when I have an actress that's going to be in a specific area and she's going to do a monologue that's emotionally important, I'm going to make sure she's looking good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I was
you
just
know,
I was thinking more along the lines of like if you're not blocking, if they don't have marks, they could just get so caught up in what they're doing that they don't realize they've walked into maybe a shadowed area where they're not being seen as well or something like that.
yeah. Well, that happens, and there are marks.
Okay.
There are marks. They use glow tape
Oh, good.
as a
Okay.
rule. Okay, so if there's light, they can see the mark, and there's not, but they still sometimes will overshoot their marks.
Hmm.
I remember once I was working with Lucille Ball. God, I love that woman. She was, you know, I mean, she could have torn me a new one, but she was, quite a woman. I really admired her.
Yeah.
And so she had a new actress on stage. She was doing a scene with her, and they were doing an over shoulders three camera show. And Lucy said, "Honey, here's what you're doing. You're standing in the wrong place. You see your shadow on me right here?" She says, "Yes, ma'am." She goes, "That's not good. You don't want to do that. Here, you need to move over this way a little bit. You see this light back over here?" She points to it. The girl goes, "That's your key light. You want to make sure you're in your clean light, your key light nice and clear, because that's what makes you look so good. Oh, by the way, could we put a lavender on that light?" That's just, you know, I can tell you funny stories about her, but I mean, she knew the work,
Yeah.
but that girl didn't know. See, so you have to deal with those elements. Yeah, it happens. In a film, you can just cut. You're dipping into the camera.
Right.
And I know
Yeah.
I was on camera at a close up, and I asked the cameraman, he goes, John, you're dipping into the lens. It's the focus issue." I go, "Oh,
Hmm.
shit, that's not good. How
Right.
did I do it?" "Yeah, you're okay now." Because
Well,
you
yeah.
get so involved in film, it's easy to push you lean into something where they have focus. It's real critical. On
Mhm.
stage, you don't have that because it's never close up.
Right. Yeah. Well, let's take a step back to where it really starts, which is the script. When you're reading a script and you decide that you want to direct whatever that project is, and we'll stick to theater because that's really more what we're talking about. Um, do you picture certain people for roles, or do you just see who comes to audition? How do you do that?
I do it both ways. I think, oh, this would be perfect for so and so. I like this person for that, and we'll need to find somebody for this. So it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about actors is like we have a kind of a troupe. And you say I have a troupe of actors that I've been working with for a while. We get new people in and new people, and new people leave. So it fluctuates. But sometimes the script calls for things that are outside of your troupe. Ethnic here is hard.
Yeah.
Finding ethnic actors, black actors, Indian actors, even. You have to go to Phoenix, and that means you have to house them. And there's economics in this process.
Yeah.
Theater's, an economical thing. So yeah, it works both ways. I yeah, and choosing those characters is what I feel about the story. To answer the other question is I'm capable and have done it of sitting down and reading a film script that I'm going to shoot on and boarding out the entire thing on the page over. I learned that from Earl Bellamy's brother, Ralph. No, Earl Bellamy, Ralph's brother. Anyway, they're brothers.
Mhm.
One was a director and the other was an actor. But the director taught me how to cut in the can, like it became something like a do, which is, by the way, very theatrical.
Mm,
This process, you're just doing theater, but you're doing it within the frame rather than a lot of cutting. If you're shooting an episodic show, you have so many setups in a day that you have to get in. So
right.
you have to be efficient to do that.
Mhm.
And so, or you're shooting low budget, and you have to be efficient in your shooting and how you're going to shoot it.
Right.
So I'll go through and cut it in the can, as they used to say. They have another way, shoot to the cut, I think they call it today. But that's what I would do. And he did it. He told me to keep the editors from putzing with his with his directorial stuff,
Right.
so they couldn't just cut to anything. They had to
Right. Yeah.
cut to what he gave them,
Mhm. No, that's
which
smart. Yeah.
yeah, well, that's why he did it. I did it to get us through the story as fast as I, because you're on play. You don't have a lot of time. All these things are going on. You got to go,
Mhm.
and so you got to find out how to do things. I've done things in one shot, just like I would have done on the stage, except that I have them in a close up, turn around and walk away. Then come back, and then pass out a frame, for example. And the whole scene just plays out in that. And when they pass out of scene, end of scene.
Right.
So, you know, and and there's so many. A wonderful thing about directing is there's so many wonderful elements to it. And in film, you get all these different departments. The stage, you do too. I I do a lot of stuff myself because I don't work with a lot of these departments. But I did a shot once where this character, we don't know who he is. We're shooting from the background in the desert, and he's got binoculars, cowboy hat. He's got a cowboy shirt on, and it's like one of his hosting cows. It's black and white, like a hosting cow.
Hmm.
And you're looking over his shoulder, and you don't know anything. See, storytelling is a question and answer. You pose a question somewhere along the line. You got to answer the question.
Right.
So you see this guy standing there, and the first thing you do, by and large, he goes, "Who's that?" And you're immediately suspicious of who that is. Okay,
Hmm.
is he good or bad? Well,
Right.
why would you say that? Well, because he's got a black and white shirt on.
Right.
It's either good or bad. Subtlety of that visual right there is so awesome. The guy who did that got nominated for an Emmy for it too.